In this video, we will learn how to use files in Node.js using async and await. So what is the async await approach? In this case, we have an await operator which is used to wait for a promise. So we have learned the promises led approach for using files earlier. And in that case, when the promise got fulfilled, then we went into the then. Here we use an await operator, and the await operator waits for the promise to be fulfilled. Where does async come in? Await can only be used inside an async function. So a function which is decorated with the keyword async, we can use await only within it. What are the advantages of using an async await approach? It makes the code look like it's synchronous, which makes it far more readable, but it's actually the asynchronous code. So as we will go through the examples and the exercises, you will realize this power and the simplicity of the async await approach. So how does the syntax look like? So here we have defined a function, my function, and note that we have decorated it with the keyword async. Why? Because we are using await in it. So here get promise returns a promise. So in the promise approach, we would have said dot then. Here we have said await get promise, and whatever result that comes from there, we are capturing it here, and then below it we can keep on handling the result. We enclose it within a try catch. So if there was an error, it will go into the catch and we can handle the error. So this is the typical syntax for a async await model. So how can we use it with files? So let's say we define a function for reading a file. So within the try and the catch, with promises, we would have said fs.promises.read file with the parameters. And now we are awaiting that promise, and whatever is the result that read file gives us will come here. So that is how we have done it. So this looks like a very synchronous code, and then we can use the data. So let's maybe run this code and see it. So let fs equal to require fs. Let's say let fname is equal to hello.text. Let data is equal to await fs.promises.read file. Which file do we want to read? Say fname in the UTF-8 format. And we can just say console.log data. This is what we did. And we should enclose this between a try and a catch. So let's do that. Catch error console.log. So now this should work for us. Let's try and run this code. And it has given us an error. Await is only valid in an async function. So we will need to put this into a function and decorate it with async. So we can just say function read file, and let's say it takes the file name as parameter if you wanted to give it, and let's make it say file name here. Now we have put it in a function, and what do we need to do? We need to decorate it with async. Now we can call this function. So let's just call read file fname. Let's run this code. And now you can see we have gotten the output. Let me get the file name here. And let's say we gave a file name which did not exist. Then what will happen? We get the error. So this is how we use the async await approach. So this was for reading a file. Similarly, for writing a file. In the case of writing a file, we don't get a result. So we have just awaited it. And after this await is fulfilled, after this promise is fulfilled, it will move to the next line. So if there is no result, it will just move to the next line. Let's try this out. So can we do it and write this code here? No, we will need to put it in a function. So let's do it. Async function write file. Let's give it a file name and a text to write. Now what do we need to do? We will need to, in a try and a catch block, we'll need to have a try catch. Here we can say await fs.promises.write file, and what do we want to write? File name comma txt. Once this is done, we'll come here and we can just say console.log write success. And if there was an error, we'll just define a catch and console.log error. So this is how we have done it. Now we can just call it, say write file fname comma, let's say xyz bbb. So let's call this, run this code now, and we have gotten a write success. If we go ahead and read it, we should get that same output. Did we save it? Let's run it again, and we get that output. So now let's use the async await approach and implement the following file functions: stat, access, read file, write file, append file. We have already done read file and write file. Let's do stat, access, and append file. So function say get stat, it gets a file name. So again, in a try and a catch, what do we say? We will get let status equal to await fs.promises.stat and the file name. And we can just say console.log status and put a catch, error goes to console.log error. Let's run it. Get stat fname. Await is only valid in an async function. We did not put an async here, so that's why we got the error, and we get the stats. Suppose we forgot to put the await here. Now if we run it, what will happen? So this will become a promise. So what should we get as an output? We should get pending, because that promise is pending. We did not await for it to get fulfilled. So this is what we get in a promise if we do that. So exactly the same thing happened, but here when we wait for it using await, we get the result. Let's run it now and we get the stats. Let's give it a file that does not exist and we get the error message. So this is get stat. Similarly, let's define our access async function check access. It takes a file name, try await fs.promises.access file name. Now if it comes here, it means this promise was successfully fulfilled. There was no error, so we can just say console.log file exists. So this file exists, and in the catch on error we can, what can we say? Console.log file does not exist. So this would be our check access. Let's run that. Check access fname. This file does not exist. So let's see, what do we get as the output? Does not exist. If we give it say hello.txt, we get file exists. So this is check access, and now we need to implement append. So async function append file, it takes a file name and say a text to append. Within a try and a catch, await fs.promises.append file, file name comma text. And here if it comes here, we can just say append success. Otherwise we'll catch the error, and let's just console.log. So standard approach, let's test that also. Append file fname comma, let's say 1 2 3 4 5. Let's run the code and we get an append success. And if we now read that file, we get the data. So this is how we have implemented all those functions using async await. Let's now maybe just do a read file, a write file, then the read file, then the write file, append the file, and do a read file. So why are we doing it? Suppose we do these 5 operations. What is the output we will get? So we get the write success, append success, and let's maybe in the read put in, let's put a console.log read file comma file name. Let's put this also in the write and the append. So write file, and let's put it in our append file also. Let's now run this code. So what do we get? If we look at the output, we first got a read file. This is what we had called. Then a write file, then a read file, then a append file, then a read file. And then we have gotten all our responses. So note, the code behaved as asynchronous. It was not that when the read file was complete, then this write file was called. So this code behaves asynchronously, but within this code, it will come to this line only when the await is fulfilled. So we get the same asynchronous behavior here as well, although the code writing has become much simpler. Next, what do we want to do? Take a text as input from the user, append the text to a file, read the file and display all its contents. So first we will append the text, and after appending the text, read the file and display all its contents. So let's start doing it. So we would also need read line to get input from the user. So we are using read line sync. If you have not installed it, just do an npm install read line sync. Let text equal to read line dot question, and what is it? Enter text to be appended. Let fname is equal to hello.txt. Now what do we need to do? We need to append and then read the file. So we will be using async await. So if we are using await, we will need to put it in a function. So let's define a function, async function, say call it exercise. Now what does it do? In a try, what do we do? Await fs.promises.append file fname, and we need, say it gives the file name and the data to be written. So we call it with the file name and the data. So if it comes here, means it has been successfully appended. So console.log, let's say append success. Now append has been successful. Now we need to read it. So let data equal to await fs.promises.read file, file name comma, and the format we want to read it in, and we can just say console.log data. and we can put a catch here, catch error console dot log error. So this is our code. So we don't need to put a try and catch for each await. Any error that comes within this, it will go into the catch block. So that will work for us. And let's now call the exer function. Let's run this code. So text to be appended, let's say BBBB. And we get an error, cannot access data before initialization. So where have we used data? We have used data. So this should have been data 1. So let's make it say data 1. Let's run it again. Text to be appended, say CCCC. And we get an error. Must be of type string or an instance. Now what is the issue here? When we are calling it, we have forgotten to give it the parameters fname comma text. So that was the error. Let's run it again. D. So we get an append success and this is the file. Let's maybe now append EEEE and we get that. So note here, we used await and then we used another await here. So we used it twice. And notice this code is so much simpler to read. Next, what do we want to do? Take a file name and text as input from the user. Check whether the file with the name exists. If it exists, display the contents of the file and then append the text to it. Otherwise, write it to a new file. Finally, read the file and display all its contents. So we need to first check whether the file exists. If it exists, display the contents, append and then display. If it does not exist, write to the file and then display its contents. So let's do it. So here, let's say we say fname is read line dot question, enter name of file. Let's delete this code and write it all again. So let's say async function exercise, and what do we do here? In a try, what is the first thing we will need to do? Check the status. So await fs.promises.access. We can use even access, and what the file name, or let's say this gets the parameters file name and the text or the data to be written. So we check the access of the file name. Now if there was an error, it will go to the catch. So if it comes here, means this file exists. So if this file exists, then what should we do? We should read it. So let's say let data1 is equal to await fs.promises.read file name comma utf8. So we have gotten the text in this, and we can just say console.log, say before appending it, this is our text data1. Now that we have done it, what should we do? We need to append this text. So await fs.promises.append file name comma data. So we have appended the data. If we come here, we can just say console.log append success. And now what do we need to do? We need to read and display the contents. So let data2 is equal to await fs.promises.read file name comma utf8. Once we have read it, we can just say console.log after and data2. So this is what we have done. Now we have this catch remaining. Now what should we do? If if the access gave an error, which means the file does not exist, then we should write to the file. So await fs.promises.write file name comma data. If we come here, means write was success. So let's print it on the screen, write success. And then what do we need to do? We need to read it. So let data 3, if you want to call it, is equal to await dot promises dot read file name comma utf8, and we can just say console dot log data 3. So this is our code. Now there is one small issue in this code. Suppose we got an error here. So we'll still go into this catch and do it. So in this catch, we have put in a lot of logic. So we don't want to go to this catch. So here, let's put it in another try catch. Catch error, where we just do console.log. So if there was an error here, it will just go in here. It will not go to this catch, because now that error is handled, it will not go here. So this would work fine for us. Now once we have done it, let's call this function xr with the file name and the txt. Let's run this code. Text to be appended, let's say www. File name, let's say hello.txt. So before this was the text, then we got an append success, and after this is the text. Let's text it again, a. Let's say hello 55.txt. Now we get a write success, so it went into this error and we have gotten this file. Let's test it again. Let's say bbb, and now let's give the same file name. Now this file should exist. So before was this, we got an append success, and after we got this. So now if you look at this code looks like very readable and much simpler code to write and follow. So that's the power of async and await. Let us look at the next exercise. Define 3 functions. Write the JSON data to a file, take inputs and append data to JSON file, and read and display the contents of a JSON file. Take the option of which function to execute from the user. So here we have a JSON course data, and what is the first function? Write it to file. So async function write JSON. Now what should it do? It should write this JSON to this file. Let's do that. Await. First we'll need to put a try catch. Await fs.promises.write file. Now what do we need to write? F name and the data. So we will need to convert this. This is an object into a string. So let str equal to, how do we convert it? We use json.stringify course data. So now we have gotten a string representation, and we can go ahead and write it. And we can just say console.log return JSON. And we can just put a catch, error goes to console.log. So this is our write JSON. Now what do we want to do? From the user, we'll take a name and age as input and put that student here. So what do we need to do? First we will take the username, the name and age as input. Then we will need to read this file, construct this JSON, post the new data into the students, and then write this JSON again back to the file system. So let's do that. So async function, say enroll new student. Now what do we do here? Let's take the name. Let name is equal to readline dot question enter name of student. Let age is equal to read line dot question, enter age of student. Let new student, let's form a JSON, is equal to, we can just say name comma age. So this will get the values name and age. Now what do we need to do? We will first need to read the file to get the JSON. So let's read it. Let data 1 equal to fs.promises.read file. Which file do we need to read? fname and utf8. We'll need to await it. So let's put an await. Once we have gotten the data in data1, we will convert it into an object. So let obj is equal to, what do we do for that? JSON.parse data1. So we have gotten the object. Now let's push the new student into it. So obj dot students dot push new student. Now once we have gotten it, we need to write this file back. So notice we are not using append because the structure is important here. So we need to write the whole object. So to write it, we will need to convert it into a string. So let's do it. Let data2 is equal to json.stringify obj. So now we have gotten a string representation, and let's write it. Await fs.promises.write file fname comma data2, and here we can say console.log student enrolled. Now we did not put this within a try catch, so let's put it. So from here we can put a try catch error and console.log. So we have now defined our enroll new student. Now what's left is to read. So let's define a function, async function read JSON. Let data is equal to await fs.promises.read file fname comma utf8. So we have gotten the string representation. Let's just put that also on the console in string format, and this is data. Let's convert it into a JSON. So let obj is equal to json.parse data and console.log obj. Now we need to put a catch here, console.log. So now that we have defined all these three functions, we need to take the option as input from the user. Let option is equal to readline dot question, enter option. 1 is write, 2 is enroll, and 3 is read. Now what do we need to do? We will switch on option. Case 1. So in the first case, what do we want to do? Write. So write JSON and a break. Case 2, enroll new student and break. Case 3, read JSON and break. So this code should work now. Let's test it. So let's first write. So we have written the JSON. Now if we have written it, let's maybe try and read it. So in string format, this is how it looks like a string. and this is the object. So now if we take a new user and input, and if we had appended this here, obviously this format would not have worked. So which is why whenever we are dealing with objects, we write the whole object again. Now what do we need to do? Let's enroll a new student, say Bob 30. We made an error. Let's run it again. Enroll a new student, Bob, and the age is 30. Student enrolled. Let's read. And you can see we get name Bob, age 30. So 4 students here. So here the format is a string. If we wanted it to be a number, let's do that. So what could we have done? Let student is age is plus age. If we did that, let's enroll another student. Let's say Kathy 28. Now if we read the data, what do we get? So Kathy, the age is now a number. So this is how we can use async await. And if we go back and read the code, what you can realize is this code is so much more readable than the callback functions or even the promises with the then and those formats. So that's the power of async and await.